All right, Chris, we are live. Just give me a nice smile here for a couple seconds. Beautiful. Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Expect Miracles podcast. We have a very special guest today, Dr. Chris Wolff. Dr. Chris has been in Blair Upper Cervical practice now for over 25 years. He is a Blair Upper Cervical Chiropractor in Seattle, Washington, and Mount Lake Terrace.
That's right.
Mount Lake Terrace, Washington.
That's the new one.
Phenomenal Blair doctor. Over the course of his career, he has ran 6 practices, seven practices, my mistake. And I love talking to people that have been in practice for as long as he has because they're a wealth of knowledge on the upper cervical front. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. So, Dr. Chris, how are you today?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. Excited.
Chris, where are you from originally?
I grew up in kind of middle northern Minnesota.
Minnesota.
I know that you're a hockey player, so I was a hockey player too.
Very nice.
That was my love. I played all the way into juniors and got hurt. Like you, I had a couple concussions, but I separated a shoulder. And that was kind of the end of my road.
Were you under chiropractic care playing, or was that something you found later on in life?
I was under the pop twist, that would kind of, keep me going. And that's a pretty good story too, of kind of how I got where I got. Yeah.
I love talking to people how they got into chiropractic and more specifically how people get into upper cervical because not too many people know about it. So what's the story on how you got into upper cervical?
Okay, gosh. Well, it's so I played sports, hockey and football and all that stuff, and got beat around. And my dad had a work injury, just to make a long story short, and he went to a chiropractor, Dr. Duncan, in our town in Minnesota. And so when we went in there, he said we should check the kids, kind of like, so that's great. And we got under care. And does he get a lot of headaches? Yeah, he does. And, all these things. And so I got adjusted. As long as I got those manipulations, my headaches got better. I did have improvements. The problem is I never really got better, though. I always needed to have it done. And I guess I didn't know any better at the time. It was just kind of like something wasn't right. Well, go see Dr. Duncan and get adjusted. Right. And I was going to go to Northwestern because that was in Minnesota. I wanted to be a chiropractor. And a funny thing, my dad being who he is, we were sitting there on a Friday night and it's packed, and he's looking around. And at that time, visits were like $28, and this is like 1984. I was maybe 10 years old. And he's like, man, look at all the $20 bills in here. Like, you should do something like this for a living. And, all about the money. Right. And so, okay, yeah. But I was intrigued by it. And so that was the avenue. And then I met John Schwartzbauer and Dr. Eric Moots in a physics lab in undergrad. So he starts talking about straight chiropractic and brings up Dr. John Hilpesh. And I'm like, what the hell is straight chiropractic? And so we go talk to John. And next thing you know, we're on a road trip on Christmas break to Sherman. And we meet Tom and Betty Gilardi. And this is in 1992, 3. So then next thing you know, I'm like, never even went to look at Northwestern. In fact, to this day, I've never been to the campus. I was just, all right, I'm going to Sherman.
Very cool. Sherman College, South Carolina.
Yep. So those guys were going there. They went ahead of me and I was lagging behind. And so when I got there, they had already met Dr. Rush and kind of got into the Blair. So I kind of was the little brother to these guys and kind of just followed what they were doing, And so got under care there. And I started getting really, in the student, because everybody's got an intern taking care of them for students. Right. So I started to get really bad, like neck pain, headaches, and from manipulation. And Betty Gilardi was still in the school then. And she had kind of basically said nobody to touch me anymore. And so I started to go see her at her and Tom's house. I think that they were in Gaffney or whatever in South Carolina there. I'd go up there every couple of days and she was doing knee chest. And she pretty much had my listing pretty close off with just an AP and a lateral. She was good, man. And like, yeah. And her first knee chest adjustment, I went home. Basically, I had migraines sometimes where I would throw up. I went home, threw up, slept. Yeah, pretty heavy retracing.
Yeah.
And I slept all the way through into the next day and missed class. And like, that was kind of the end of my getting my neck popped and cracked. And then I went in to get my Blair views with Perry, and it was pretty much right on. And I just kind of stuck with care with him. So that's how I got into doing Blair, and kind of a quick version of it. But I knew I wanted to be a chiropractor. I just didn't know where I was going since I was probably about 12,
What was it like getting adjusted by Dr. Perry Rush? I've heard unbelievable things about him.
Perry's good, man. Perry's what I love about Perry's no bones be it. You mean? You just
Yeah.
kind of going in there, it is what it is. And he was trained by Blair too, right? And um nice adjustment, fast. I did really well with him, and you're kind of in and you're out. There wasn't much more to it than that.
And Doc, you just brought up something interesting. Sometimes things get a little worse before they get better. Sometimes migraines kick in a little bit after an adjustment. Sometimes, it's sometimes we do get those miracle adjustments where everything goes away, and then also could go to the other side. Things rev up a little bit. What do you think especially when you get the right adjustment? Why do you think that does ramp up a little bit?
That's a great question. I mean, I think there's always the retracing. It's something I've kind of paid attention to more lately. Like for instance, I have this gal right now who had dizziness and vertigo issues, and wasn't, she's a tattoo artist, likes to work out, she's in shape, but hadn't been doing any of that. It had been months. She was gonna do Nuka, and then she decided to come to me, and who knows why that is. And anyways, I think maybe my explanation of the way things was better. So she had been doing better, and she'd been doing great, and she's 12 weeks into care now, maybe a little bit more, and she's back to work and she's working out. And then all of a sudden, like the last 2 visits or last 2 or 3 weeks, she's kind of like, oh, things aren't any good.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, okay, well, let's have a conversation. Like, because my notes and my recollection is things are good. Your work, yeah, but I've got this stress, and I'm moving. All these things, and I'm having this pain in my neck right here. Can you feel it? Well, I can't feel your pain, but I can feel that. Yeah, it feels there's maybe something fixated in that area. Well, is there anything you can do about that? Well, it depends. Like, what do you want me to do about it? Like, do you want me to have a magic potion to make it feel better? Or do you want me to like move something that doesn't need to be moved in order for you to not continue to improve? Well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that you're not out. I just did your scan. You've been holding. You are back to work. Julie's her name. You are back to working out. You just moved. There's a number of things going on in your life, and you went from doing nothing and having pain to doing much, much, much more and doing better. And now your level of bearing for what is going on with how you feel is changed. And so let's just talk about, and I think that's important to talk about, because a lot of times people's lifestyles change as they get better.
Yeah.
And as they do more, it's not the same. And so take retracing out of it, there's also a lot of other things occurring. And, we're not sitting in a BJ Palmer hospital here where we're moving all of that. Like, it's a real life, right?
Yeah.
And so, she understood that, and she came back this week, and she was kind of doing okay. She wanted me to feel that again and kind of think like what I thought about that. And I just stick with, I don't want to call it a story. I stick with the truth of what it is, because
patient education too.
She's doing fine. And her tests are all fine. Like, we redo the posture, we do the range of motion. I do all these tests every 6 weeks, right? And all of these things, and you look at all the scans, and you look at what her symptom numbers are, and you look at her Bourne's mouth and all these different, indexes I'll use. And it's all better. It's funny how people will have these days or these weeks where it's like, oh, it's just not working anymore.
Yeah.
She's also like, you follow the retracing charts, and she's kind of coming back into, and they're not right on for any instance, but she might be back in a restructuring phase too, like where the body's actually, she's like, well, should I go get a massage? And I'm like, well, I don't know, like, what's your goal with that? Like, do you want to get a massage so you can, feel a little bit better for a short period of time? Or do you want to loosen muscles that are perhaps tight because she has a kyphosis? There's the other thing. I think she had around, it's over 20 millimeters of anterior head carriage. Like, I had that, and mine was completely reversed. And I said that burning you're feeling, there's a ligament called the nuchal ligament that strands the back of your neck from your skull to the top of your CT junction, we call it. I said that's probably working as well with all of this change that's going on. So you're gonna feel that,
Absolutely.
So that's probably a lot more explanation than you wanted me to give, but
No, that's good.
I love
It's good for,
talking about it, and I
yeah,
think it's a great question. And I don't know that any of us really know, but what I do know is that the tests aren't wrong. They
right.
just aren't. You
And
know,
that comes with experience too, to actually tell your patient, listen, because it's easy when you're first starting out to, oh, you're not feeling good. Let me let me cater to that. And
right,
obviously, we want our patients to feel better, but
right.
does it's even better to put your foot down and say, listen, there's nothing going on. The tests are showing clear. We're going to do more harm than good if we give you an adjustment right now.
For sure, and I've made that mistake, in 25 years in, and I think I've made a lot of mistakes. I wouldn't,
Mhm.
I think anybody that would sit here after 25 years and said that they had it was a liar. You can learn from 'em. I think it's good to pass on. I'm really strict now, and I can see why Muncie was the way he was, and a lot of these old school guys were the way they were, which I appreciate, and I thought was kind of like we would joke and think it was kind of funny, when we
Yeah.
were younger. But as I'm getting older, I realized like these guys they just had that conviction, I think is a great word that you just can't have after a year or 2 or 5 or 10, you
Mhm.
see a lot of these guys going into coaching after a couple of years in practice, like there's nothing. Let me tell you something, there's nothing, after 5 years that's worth it telling really anybody else, and that was coming from myself as well. Like,
Yeah.
there's you gotta be in this gig for a while in order to really get it and
Absolutely.
have that conviction. There's my cat. Um, to stand on that, right? And to be able to tell that person like, "Hey, like, remember we said this was gonna take 24 to 36 months to correct," and in her case, I think that's being conservative. I mean, for me, my curve didn't come around for I think it was, over 50 months, so over 5 it was over into 5 years. Took a
Absolutely.
while, right? And so we wanna
Absolutely.
see these it's like today's world, it's like, I'm gonna put money in the stock market, and I'm gonna make a ton of money
Right
tomorrow.
away.
It's
Yeah.
just not how it's I mean, yeah, maybe, but, like, not everybody, and it's certainly not gonna be the majority.
How do you how do you tell your patients the first time they come into the office, hey doc, how long is this going to take? I know every case is different and the severity of each case is different, but how do you like to educate people on that question? How long is this going to take, doc?
Well, it spans case to case, of course, but I tell everybody what we do is we're gonna outline 2 cases of care for you that span over 12 weeks. You're gonna have a reevaluation at 6 weeks. In the course of care, if along the way, if I feel like you're not doing as well as we think you should, we won't continue to treat you. Like if what we're doing isn't going to make a difference for you. But if that is the case, I've already outlined your second 6 weeks of care at 12 weeks, and we'll continue to outline care as needed until we either decide that this is just maintenance, or well, I hate that word, but you know what I mean. Obviously, you're going to tell them we'll continue to outline care till you're fully corrected, but that's going to take a long time. And most of the time, people at that point are so much better that they continue with their once a month or once every 2 months or whatever it
Yeah,
might be. Yeah. But the initial catch though is 6 weeks. Like
yeah.
you really got to get an improvement, I feel like, in 6 weeks in order for
Got
somebody
to
to
see the needle
bite.
move a little bit in that 6 week period.
Yeah, if they don't get that, and that's what we always defer to, like it maybe you're a week or two in, and gosh, I don't see we're not, we got to get to that reeval. And if we get to the reeval and there's not a ton of symptomatic change, generally there is, but let's just say there's that one case that, but you're like, this posture, this head tilt that was an inch is now a quarter inch. And this, your forward flexion in your neck was, 32 degrees and now it's 52, like we're making a difference. If you can get them to see that, I think they'll hang on. And most of the time they do,
Yeah,
they already know that.
yeah.
Uh, but honestly, and you've probably seen this too. There's very few times we get to 6 weeks if people follow the care programs that somebody's not better,
Absolutely. In
or
some way.
you know,
Yeah.
to some degree. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And especially we see people with upwards of 10 to 15 neurological symptoms. And, maybe 5 or 6 of those are better by that 6 week mark. And then we got some work to do. But it's going to keep getting better and better each month with those little dips in those healing cycles as well.
Right. And what I find too sometimes is, or a lot of times, is that I had this guy just put his a post about him on Facebook that was pretty much suicidal from sciatica, and I've had a lot of sciatica cases lately, and it's funny how that works when you get one, and then all of a sudden they you have 10,
Yeah.
and right, and he was bad. I mean, he came in from a referral from my patient who came in, Melissa's her name, was like, my neighbor has sciatica and I told him to come see you. But then I thought, I don't know if you do the low back, like you're a
Yeah,
neck guy, and like, is that going to work? And I'm like, well, absolutely. It could. I mean, I'm not saying that it will, but we should get him in for an exam
absolutely.
and check him out. This has happened a lot. And so she's like, okay, well, I'm going to tell him. We have these little invitations to good health. I'll give to people here and there that he can come in for the free exam just to kind of get him to bite. Because sometimes people that have been through that stuff, they've been through a lot and they're like, so he bid, he came in and he barely made it in, and he went right back to the back room where my consult and CBC areas, and he just laid on the floor. And he was groaning and in pain, and he hadn't shaved in 2 months. He hadn't done his hair in 2 months. He hadn't showered in 2 months. He had so much pain. And so he's laying there, and I'm thinking, oh my God, thank God I have the CBCT, because if I had to take x-rays on this guy, it would be a lot of work. That's the other cool thing about that.
Oh man,
Especially the Mecca, because it's standing. He barely could stand there to take the CBCT, first of all. But he did. And he was hanging on and he was swearing. He's a funny guy, but he likes this trucker mouth. I'm like, so anyways, I told him, like, man, if we make a big difference here in 6 weeks, I'm going to be really surprised. Like, I think we're going to get you slowly back to walking, and, this is going to take some work. I didn't want to blow his.
Yeah.
This guy, after a week, was already walking back in. He came in yesterday. It's been, I think, 8 weeks now. And he's like, he knew I went to this country festival over the weekend. So he came in with a cowboy hat on, like, to tribute to me, like, to kind of like, how was it? And wrote a huge review. And like, he told me in a chair after his first adjustment how he was thinking about.
Yeah.
And
it saves lives, man. Upper cervical saves lives. It's crazy.
75, and he had some debt, and he didn't know how he was going to pay for this. And, I'm like, well, I'm going to get you better. I just had to give him some hope, and man, like that's one recently that like was, geez, man, like, holy crap.
Absolutely. That's it. And it never gets old.
Yeah.
And so, Doc, so you being in practice for over 25 years, what keeps you going and motivated? You've opened 7 offices. You've probably made your money. You probably accomplished a lot close to what you wanted to accomplish in this profession. What keeps you going and more enthused than you've been when you just started?
I think there's a number of things. I think, I'd be lying if there's a little bit of ego there. I mean, I love, I always joke that, like, I play a doctor for work, that I like being that guy, that Dr. Wolff guy, but I also like the fact that people can, come in. I had a gal with trigeminal neuralgia recently that, that couldn't wear a hat. Now she's wearing hats again. And she had been through, they did a surgery to remove a vein because they thought, there's all this junk. And I just feel like, it's maybe cliche, but if not me, who, like, if I was to quit today, like, what would those people do? And I think one of the things I've seen throughout my career is the people who do the best have the biggest purpose. They also love what we do immensely. I've had some associates, I won't name any names, but that had all the talent in the world that could have done a lot better. And I've had some that I'm like, man, this is going to be a project that, like, you're like, holy crap, they're just kicking butt, and they love what we do, and they have a bigger purpose, and they have hustle, they show up. I always said on another podcast, I think availability and purpose are 2 big things in what we do. Like, you got to be available. You got to show up. I'm going to see a guy after this podcast at 2:00
on your day off,
because he's jacked and he's going out of town, and I want to make sure he stays on this care program. And, that's just kind of what I've always done, and I work Saturday mornings a lot when I'm home for about an hour. It's not a big deal, but I'll see 20 people, and they love it. And I think that's a big reason why I've been successful. I think that's the reason why I've seen a lot of others be successful, is that they have that push,
Absolutely.
Another thing I've always said, this isn't a hobby. This isn't, like, I'm going to do this, half days Monday. I'm going to, put in a full day Wednesday. I'll take off early on Friday and go golf Thursday. And I'm going to, have all the, it's just, I mean, maybe at some point in your life, but this is a what have you done for me lately kind of gig. Like, it's all about new patients. It's all about results. You're going to be lucky if 10, 15% of those people hang on forever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you got to keep going. And you get into as long as I have, you have people, I had 3 this week that hadn't been in 6 years. They're coming back in.
Very cool.
Some were COVID reasons, some were whatever reasons, some were, I was doing pretty good. And now, those things you said, I'm coming back. You were right. I don't know. I think that what keeps me going is I just love what we do. And I think the CBCT is, I think I told you earlier before we recorded this, that's really brought me in more. Couple of reasons for that is it's really easy to, I can do that scan so fast. It's fun. When you've done x-rays like I have, and when I used to sit in a developing room that used to be a bathroom. Okay. And it was a small bathroom, and I'd tuck in there and I'd be shoving when I first started, and I wrote a thing on the wall. I put all these kids' pictures on there, and I'm like, I'm going to put this date here, because when I get to 5 years, like, that's going to be like, I kind of made it, and that's 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes by quick, but I love, I don't need to be sold, or I don't even argue with people anymore. Like, what we do, like, you either want to be involved in it or you don't. Like, if you want to sit here and have like some sort of like conversation as to why chiropractic, blah, 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 like, I'm good. Like, I'm just going to go, I'm going to go walk and
just look at the results.
Yeah. I don't need you to sit there and go, you're not a real doctor. Those are
fun. So, Dr. Chris, where did the multiple practices evolve from? Was that something you always wanted to do? Did that just, you were getting busy in one office, decided to expand? Were they all in Seattle? How did that work?
Well, it's definitely something I didn't even have a clue I wanted to do. I associated with Dr. Mike Lenars. So he took me in out here, and we started the Ballard office, which is my main clinic I've had for that whole time. And
that was your first office you started in with Lenars? Wow.
So I bought from him and learned the ropes, and we did 5-star management with Noel Lloyd, who I'm still with. And, I've paid probably as much money or more, actually probably more money in consulting fees in my career than I did for college, so I think that's another just a real side. I get a lot of people like, hey, can I pick your brain, or can I, I'm like, yeah, I mean, you can pick my brain, but like, there's another reason from, why I've been able to do what I do is I invested in what I do.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars, not 10,000, not hundreds of thousands. Right.
No, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And so I think when you're doing, fee for service, and you're doing, these types of clinics, they're one of the best at it. And so
what is that 5-star? What
5-star management? Yeah.
5-star management.
Yeah. Yeah. Noel Lloyd. It's based out of Redmond, Washington. Well, I think he's anyways, he's in Seattle. Used to be in Redmond. And so Lenars was with them, and I had that coaching, and, I had a surroundings. I remember walking into one of the seminars, and there's all these guys from Texas. I forget their name. And they had these practices, and this was full spine too. So, one of the jokes was, full spine chiropractors get miracles too. So we don't, and so they're in there talking about, 400 visits a week, 500 visits a week. And I'm starting out, and I'm like, man, I was beating my head. I'm doing screenings. I'm doing all these things. I was working all the time. And I'm at like 60 visits a week, and I'm in my first year, and I'm like, man, how am I going to get through this? And I'm just listening to these guys and looking, and then, they'd always get encouragement. And then one day, I had an event that I got over 100. And then I had an event that I got over 200. And I remember I lost my front desk gal. She was an alcoholic, and she stole a bunch of money. This is a great story.
Wow.
And I had just done this event where I got like 50 new patients, and I had this one other gal who worked for me part-time, and we did that all on our own. 6 months later, I found all these charge slips that never got entered because we were just too busy. I was working till 1 a.m. doing stuff, and one of my patients was driving limo. He drove a Rolls Royce, and his name was Tom, and he pulls up out front. He's like, I saw the lights on, doc, so I had some leftover bottle of champagne. I was wondering if you wanted a nightcap. I'm like, sure. And so these are stories, I worked hard, man. I still work hard, but I worked hard. I don't think anybody nowadays understands like what I was Saturday, Sunday. I was there that night till 3 in the morning. I slept for a few hours, came back and saw 80 patients the next day. It's what I did. And so, anyways, back to, so getting, practices, I was, doing really well at the time. I bought my clinic out, and Linares had said, you need to get an associate in here. And so he had a gal. And so I got her in, and I was doing over 300 a week at that point. And so then I was like, well, I should just open another office. So I did. And that was in Issaquah. And I did that one. And then I just that one went well. And I just kind of kept doing it. It's the key to doing that really is you really have to have a good doctor. You have to have good training, manual. You have to get people. It's kind of like Hamburger U for McDonald's, right? Like they need to be turnkey. I think a good book for anybody interested in that is something that Noel Lloyd recommends. It's out of 5 stars. The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. I read that book. Everything we do is based off of that. Mm-hmm. There's a manual. There's a way to look up anything that we do. We have scripts. We have, everything's, and, some people say like, I don't like scripts. Well, you may not like them, but I guarantee you say a lot of the things you do over and over again. So you might as well say them concisely, and you might as well say them repetitively in a manner that that you said it, because sometimes I've used this where people say, well, you never told me that. And I'm like, and I just I'm like, actually I did. It's part of a script, and it was there. Right. Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. But the other part of it is when you bring in other doctors or you have staff, right? Like you need to be able to manage. And so when something's not going right, for instance, say screenings, okay, we're not getting anybody to screening. We have a script for that. Well, give me the screening script, screen me. And then invariably there's something missing from the script. It's not right. What's wrong with people aren't committing to care. Well, give me your close and give me your report of findings. Well, there's something missing out of there. Right. And it needs to be that way. And so if you're going to do these things, you need to be committed to training, and you need to be committed to having those things controllable through those manageable things, because the last thing you want to do is have 2 or 3 jobs. And what I mean by that is you have 2 or 3 clinics. The next thing you know, you're running them all.
Yeah.
And that happens. I've been through that.
And that what you were doing too, that E-Myth book I read, that's not easy. It's easy to read. It took a lot of effort to make those scripts and systematize everything that people don't want to do either. So it's not, I think a lot of associates they might see the owner, it looks like they're kicking back and just collecting, but there's an art and a lot of work that goes into that as well.
Right. And they'll be like, well, I think we can say it better. I mean, maybe we can say it better, but this is how you're going to say it. Mm-hmm. I mean, for now. Until you can close at 85%, and you can collect at 95%, and you're over 40,000 a month collected, and you can see 150 a week. Like, I guess we'll probably just do it my way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, Dr. Chris, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years with upper cervical going?
Well, I'll still be practicing. I know that. I kind of want to get into doing some more stuff, kind of like you're doing right now with the podcast. I've been kind of looking at that. I don't know which direction I want to take that, whether I want to take it with just chiropractic, or if I want it to be some sort of other, venture involved with business or whatever. But I think, that's probably pretty much it. I don't really see myself doing a lot more. I'm kind of, they always say chiropractor. I don't think I'm really that per se, but I am upper, Blair. I'll bleed and die that. There's just no change in that for me. It's not to say that I don't appreciate other techniques, I think, and I certainly do. And it's just that, I don't know, the x-ray analysis and the imaging for me is kind of the clincher.
And what do you think the secret is to outside the office? You've been in practice 25 years. You got to try to have a good balance too. What are some of the things you do to keep that balance, keep everything running?
Gosh, I've been through a lot. I think we talked about earlier. I went through burnout for a while. I went on a triathlon kick from about.
That's right. I read that in your bio.
Yeah, from about 2005 to 2016. I I raced pretty much all over the world. I've done over 200 triathlons. I raced pretty high level, 9 Ironmans, over 50 half Ironman. Had a good run with that. That was good.
What did that do for you? I mean, that's got to break down a bunch of mental barriers. I mean, what was that? What's that like running an Ironman?
Oh, it's probably not too much different than opening a practice or whatever. There's a lot of things. I used to do a lot of head clearing on the bike rides. I would every week. I was probably at a point where I had a coach, so I would do 20,000 to 30,000 meters in the pool a week, 60, 70 miles a week running, and I'd be on the bike 250 to 300 miles a week, right? So there's a lot of, it's like a gunslinger.
And you're taking care of people.
Yeah, and I had three clinics at one point. Then at that point, I'd sold some, and I had 4 or 5 associates, so I was managing all of that and racing and working my days. And I think it was good through the time period to go through. I started so young, like I was barely 24 when I started practicing. I'll turn 50 in January, so it's a weird thought. So I've been practicing longer than I was alive now, right? When I started. And so I think like there was a part of that kind of, and I was busy, and I did really well for a young guy, and that's tough. And all you guys out there that are younger, and if you're struggling, like you just keep your head down and keep doing it, and just know that your job. And some people are not going to always dig that, and they're going to look at you, and there's going to be a lot of people though that they like young doctors. You're smart, you're out of school, right? And there's those that don't. But I went through a point where I had fake glasses to try and make myself look older. Tried all these tricks.
Grow a little beard.
And but the triathlon, I think gave me a lot of mental break. I love sports. It gave me an opportunity to kind of stay in shape. And I mountain bike now, and I kind of thought I wanted to get back in Xterra, but I have a 4-year-old daughter, and that's a bit. So I think I'm going to wait for her to get maybe just a couple years older and get her going, and maybe we'll do some tries together and whatnot. But I basically just, I might lift. Now I fish. I'm big into fishing and hunting, so I spend a lot of time doing those hobbies. So if I'm pretty much not at the office or with my kid, I'm on my boat.
Very cool.
Yeah, I got invited to a couple of summer parties this weekend. I'm like, if you want to have the party on the boat, we can. Yeah.
Very cool. So, Dr. Chris, at the end of every episode, I like to ask all my guests, what is one piece of advice that has resonated with you over the years that you would like to gift the audience? Could be absolutely anything, upper cervical, life related, whatever you want.
I think it's a good adage. My buddy, me and Darren White have been buddies for a long time, and I think one of his favorite quotes is, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I live that way. I had a talk. I got this kid interning with me this summer in my Mount Lake Terrace office, and he's smart. He's probably got all the talent in the world to want to be a chiropractor if he wants to. But I sit down with him yesterday, and I kind of just told him, I want to give you a little bit of an evaluation of what I see. And I said, I've been in that chair before, so I don't want you to take anything I'm going to say as personal. I don't want you to think that it's coming from a place of whether I think that I'm better than you, or he's 25. When I was 25, when I was 25, I was practicing, first of all. And I said, I said, one of my favorite lines in life is how you do anything, is how you do everything. I said, if you came to my effing house, I used to, we like to swear sometimes. And I said, if you watch me, if I'm doing the yard, or if I'm taking the garbage out, like there's just a certain intent of how I do things. And if you watch me do it, he said, you've seen me here. And he's like, yeah. And I said, when you walked in today, you yawned, you looked tired. You went and did couple scans, and I saw you waiting for him, and you yawned. And I said, I pay attention. Because he had asked me, well, what are some examples? And so I'm giving this, and I said, I can tell you right now, I said, his name's Alex. I said, you might want to be a chiropractor, or you might want to be anything. Let's just say it's not even chiropractic. But if it's not that, I'm like, you have to understand that, how you do anything is how you do everything, and how you're showing up you know, for most of the time, like, there's times where you have brightness, but like today, for instance, is just, you're not here to want to, you know, even learn. You're kind of here just, who knows why you're here. And he's kind of looking at me. And I've taken care of his mom and his dad for years. And I said, I have all the respect in the world for your mom and your dad. And I'm having this conversation because I love you, not because I want to put you down. And I don't want you to take this in a way that's negative. I want you to take this in a loving manner that maybe this will click for you and go like, you know what? I cared enough about you to tell you that how you're moving right now is not how you're going to win. You're going to need to change that. And you're going to need to look in the mirror. And if it doesn't matter if you want to be a chiropractor, if you want to be a, you know, in business or whatever it is you want to do, you're going to have to change how you show up. And maybe this isn't your purpose. That's another thing why you think maybe there's something that lights you up and maybe this isn't it. Maybe it is, you know. And I said, I had no idea what that freaking term was, even that when I was, you know, getting into chiropractic. Like, I just like, oh, it's a career. And I had been under chiropractic and I, you know, I wanted to make money, and this was a, you know, a venture to do that, certainly, but the venture to do that comes with hustle. And that's one thing I think Mike Lenars could always tell you, even when I was, you know, I had to be coached and we had our ups and downs, but when I was associate, but I always worked hard, man. And I still do. And I had somebody tell me, he's like, why do you work Saturdays? And I'm like, I don't know. What else am I going to do Saturday morning? Like, I'm up and I'm not really, if I don't have anything else to do, why don't I go check people? And there's a lot of people that need help on Saturday mornings, just like they do on Monday mornings. And I've gotten a lot of new patients that way. So I'm not saying you have to be a workaholic, and I probably am to a certain extent. You know, I'm probably a lot of that stuff, but you know, the best people, Kevin, you probably see in sports, with the best people that I played with in hockey, they worked the hardest. They put in the time. They were in their garage. They were on the ice. They were right. There wasn't, you know, certainly there was talent, but that's part of it. It's not all of it. And a great book on that is, you know, Talent Code. We'll talk a lot about, you know, just repetitions and neurology. I think it's a great book for that reason with chiropractic and you know, you have to create those habits and you got to start young. So I think that's kind of the best thing I've gotten. That's how I operate and how I roll. Certainly it's not perfect. And, you know, I'm not sitting here trying to say that I am, but I do have a high awareness. And I think there's another word, you know, consciousness and awareness. And I think the higher consciousness aware individuals, and maybe that has to do with, I don't know that I was that aware and conscious when I was not cleared out and had a kyphosis that was completely reversed curve. I was jacked, you know, I wouldn't be here sitting with you if I hadn't had chiropractic care. So I think upper cervical and that Blair adjustment, right? So there, I think, is a conviction. You know, I think that helps for all of us that have had that. You know, those that haven't had that, you know, I certainly think they're looking for other sorts of purpose. But man, it's a life changer. I wouldn't be doing it now.
Yep. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard, right?
That's right.
And Doc, where can people find you on social media?
I'm on Facebook. It's just Christopher Wolff. I'm on Instagram. Just, I think it's Dr. C Wolff as my @. I'm on TikTok. You know that. I think that's
Tagged your TikTok. It's Vitality Specific MTL.
I have
right?
2 of them. Yeah, I think it's Vitality Specific MLT, and I have a Dr. Wolff one too. I have to work on that one a little bit more, but yeah. And I am currently, you know, looking for any associates out. Anybody that's interested in an associate. I've done over 50 associates, so there's a little plug for that too. And I enjoy doing that. I think that for me is a lot of fun, taking somebody that, you know, bring them in and make them successful. And I've done that quite a few times.
There's a ton of students coming in from Life and Sherman to that annual. The clubs are firing over there, so you're going to have some good pickings.
Well, I'll be there. Yeah. Well, anybody that wants to work hard, have fun, and make money, we'll get along real good. You know, not necessarily in that order. That's a Noah Lloyd punch. He always likes to steal his stuff. He's got a lot of good liners.
And we're gonna keep an eye out for that podcast coming out.
Yeah, it's gonna be called Fortitude. That's one of my favorite words. So I'm gonna name it Fortitude, and I just need to get my butt rolling. Maybe I need to pick your brain a little bit on.
Yeah, I would love. There's a ton of different routes you can go, but I could definitely help you get started.
Yeah,
sure.
so I need coaching too.
Absolutely, we all do.
Yeah. So back to balance. So then once done with this, I'm going to go hang out with my kid the rest of the day.
Well, Doc, thank you so much for coming on the show. Would love to have you back on anytime. And yeah, thanks for so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right.